The BRICS Infrastructure Working Group is of the view that a blended finance, a stable regulatory framework, as well as a generous rebate system would be critical to bridge the infrastructure gap and accelerate development in South Africa. And this could also be used to leverage the African Continental Free Trade Area. Infrastructure development plays a key role in ensuring fast economic growth and also alleviating poverty. Now, the BRICS Business Council held a number of stakeholder engagements with working groups from the South African chapter on infrastructure development. The co-chair of the BRICS Infrastructure Working Group, Zodwa Mbele, says that they wanted to share knowledge with BRICS member countries and also industry experts to show how South Africa can benefit from the engagement. Mbele joins us now virtually to discuss some of the infrastructure development projects in South Africa and infrastructure vital for growth in the country. The private sector hesitant to invest in the African Free Trade Area needs infrastructure investment in order for them to really be enticed to come on board. So let's talk more about that. Ms. Mbele, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning to you and your listeners, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about the workings of the Infrastructure Working Group under the BRICS Business Council. So indeed, you have indicated that infrastructure is very critical, to catalyze the economic development. And the way we looked at it, it was not only from the South Africa lens, we also were looking at it, from the regional integration point of view. As we know that if you develop, one country, it also makes sense that other countries must develop. And taking into consideration that there is Africa Continental Free Trade that needs to be operationalized. But just going back to your opening, I think one of the projects that the minister mentioned in our deliberations, it was the border posts. So it's more tangible projects, the 6 border post projects. I believe that it is going on procurement process now, requests for proposals as a triple P project, which gives ample opportunities for the private sector to participate in. Private sector is willing to finance infrastructure. I think it's important to say that. Only that they require the pipeline that is bankable, the pipeline that is available. They also have requirements in terms of the regulatory framework being certain. They want also the financial system that is robust, that is working. So they don't have and in South Africa, they don't think we have a problem with the regulatory environment in as far as galvanizing private sector to participate in the infrastructure development. What we do still lack is to push the projects into the pipeline such that they are bankable. And I think that is a challenge that is faced by the countries, South Africa, but also by the continent. So what it means then is that we are looking for the kind of funding that would be, deployed at an upstream level where you can turn projects from concept into pre-feasibility studies, then move into feasibility studies. That there lies in the challenge, because very few institutions would want to fund the risk capital, not knowing how the feasibility study will turn out. So just to give you that perspective from my side. So let me pause there so that I allow you to ask me more questions. I can talk and talk non-stop on the subject.
I'm grateful for allowing me the opportunity to get a question or two in. So, Ms. Mbele, what are the impediments to this fast-tracking of the infrastructure development? Because you say, there does seem to be phases where we stall, but what are the key impediments there?
It's exactly that, the funding, the kind of funding. So we have to make a distinction. Infrastructure financing is available, the financing of that. Show me any bankable project. I mean, all as ourselves as banks, DFIs, commercial banks, when there is IPPs out there, the independent power producers, we all stumble, to go for the kill because it's available. But the issue is that there is so much pipeline, but that pipeline of project is not pushed to a point where you'd have the equivalent of the IPP ready to go to market for funding.
But why is that?
Because no one wants to take.
Is
It's
it because
risky.
of a lack of technical skill? You know,
It's
can you
risky.
outline the risk for us, or what exactly?
Yeah, it is risky. It's not that the skills is not there, but think about it. If I need to undertake a feasibility study, and it turns out that it's fatal flawed, this project won't work the way I thought it would. That money is sunk. I can't recover it. So it's just the nature of it. This is why institutions who have appetite, and you won't expect commercial banks all the time, which they don't do because they pay dividends. We also pay dividends, by the way. But I think it's about time they need to think beyond that part. It's only institutions like ourselves at the Development Bank and other DFIs, the IDC and African Development Bank, who provide that risk capital. We call it project preparation facilities. You don't find the same with the banks because it's so uncertain at that stage, to put money. And along the way, when it comes to feasibility stage, then you realize that actually, not that you realize, studies prove that this project is fatally flawed, either from the technology that is being used, or either maybe from the environment or from the financial analysis. So there could be various reasons why the project is completely flawed. And when we say it's technically flawed or it's not feasible anymore. So in that way, that is the impediment that people worry about. That you may also have a demand for it, but it may not wash its face. It may not have the ability to repay back. So we all see projects that have got a need, but they may not pay back because of the nature of that project. And you can only realize that when you advance it from the feasibility to the feasibility stage. That's why I'm saying that there lies in a risk, and most institutions are reluctant to take that risk. But for us as development finance institutions, we've taken that risk. We have divisions that specialize with that. Of course, the money is not enough, and projects move at a slow pace at that stage as well. So it's largely that. It's nothing else.
So
And in some cases, it's not even.
how do we de-risk it then? Because we keep hearing this song that infrastructure development holds the key to better days for South Africa. But, with the problems that you've just outlined, we need to obviously find a solution. How do we go about doing that?
So in South Africa, specifically, we can talk about that. We already set up the Infrastructure South Africa. You possibly know about it, which looks for projects that the government of South Africa wants to implement. And if you think about those projects, some of it, they hinge on government's ability to budget over a longer period of time. So basically, and then we have an infrastructure fund. Those are new babies in South Africa in terms of the infrastructure delivery is concerned. And all you are looking at in there is you allow the fund, for instance, to be an accelerator, bring forth funding, which will be repaid by government over a longer period of time. As we speak right now, government has got only the ability to budget for a period of 3 years. That's their budget framework, as opposed to budget over a 10-year period. Now, when you say to a private sector come in and implement this project, you will be repaid. The private sector say, but I will only be repaid over 3 years because I can only see that, the timelines from government, the repayments only over 3 years, not over 10 years. And that's what governments need to look into, changing the budgetary framework such that the framework of the payment the budget framework is aligned to the repayment term to help the private sector to appreciate that the payment will definitely be there in a guaranteed form, not by implication that I should just keep hoping that even after 3 years, government will budget for this project in order to repay the debt that is required, that the private sector would have put up front. So it's just a combination. And I don't think it's a big stumbling block for South Africa, that part. We've come a long way. It's just a matter of them refining that. But if you look also at the institution like ISA, the Infrastructure South Africa, they are also there to unblock certain regulatory issues. Maybe there's a stumbling block with an environmental issue on a particular project, or it will take long. So that's really the job of the ISA, if you think about it. So we're kind of making some inroads in ensuring that we have institutions that can also deal with certain impediments that relate to government. Because as we say, funding is not a problem, but what is a problem is just to tweak some of the frameworks to make sure that it's in line with what can be rolled out in terms of infrastructure. And again, keep in mind, you cannot finance infrastructure for a shorter period of time. I mean, no one can take a debt that needs to be repaid over 3 years. It's just going to be unsustainable. So whoever that funds infrastructure must always be prepared to be repaid over a longer period of time, which is what we are talking about when we say, but at the same time, they cannot do that and say, hey, I'm hoping that government after 3 years, once the MTF period as it rolled over all the time, they will make sure that they will budget. That's not what private sector wants to do. So those are the things that we are aware of it, but the government just need to tweak some of them.
One would imagine that...
especially when it's government dependent for repayment. If it's private sector dependent for repayment, it's not a problem. I mean, you've seen with the IPPs. It's not necessarily government that is repaying, it's ESCOM that is repaying. Only that they underpin as a government implicit guarantee.
Well, hopefully there will be solutions found. But if we just cast our net a little further, the success of the African Continental Free Trade Area will obviously also require massive investment in infrastructure. So how then do you go about mobilizing the substantial financing that would be needed to build the much needed infrastructure that will enable the industrialization and trade in this particular aspect?
It's a similar concept that applies. Remember also the mobilization, and that's a discussion we had in our forum, in our working group. The idea that we were selling South Africa, including Africa, as a, outside SA, obviously, the other countries, to our BRICS member countries. These are the opportunities. The infrastructure gap that you see you just need to seize it as an opportunity, to invest in this, because they do have deep pockets of money, obviously subject to the regulatory frameworks, like we have already spoken about, being certain. So the mobilization of funding will not necessarily be coming from South Africa or from our own countries, but if we present credible projects, to our BRIC member states and counterparties, they were very clear that they are forever keen, and I remember one of them was even saying, we are very clear, we are not here to gamble. So it goes back to the earlier concept that we were talking about on the project that is bankable. They are not here to gamble, but obviously they are here to make their money and return their money. The relationship has to be of mutual benefit, of course. Whilst we are not here to gamble, but also we need to make sure that the country is benefiting, the infrastructure that is built is also sustainable. So it's plenty of opportunities, basically, if we really want to realize the Africa Continental Free Area. It really has to be done holistically, not in an integrated fashion. Obviously, maybe some countries, it's early days, every country is thinking about themselves. I think that's a reality that we also need to be alive to, whilst we're pinning some hopes, but we also need to be cognizant of that.
Well, thanks so much, Ms. Mbele. We'll leave it there for now.